What is going on, y'all? It is your role model of the IWC Gamers Goon, and as you can see, we got the Christmas hat on, we got the Santa hat on, because that means it is time for the 25 days of Goonsmas. I will be uploading videos from yesterday. Yesterday, you will be getting a Dynamite review, and I will be uploading videos all the way up until Christmas, which will be my last video of Goonsmas, 25 days in a row, uploading. But we're gonna have some more videos coming out later this month. If you haven't already heard about Goonsmas, I did shout it out on Twitter, and I already started it yesterday with the Dynamite review, which hasn't happened yet. Just so you know, I'm filming this a little bit early because I do have finals next week. So I'm getting some of these out of the way. But today we are talking about who really owns professional wrestling at this moment right now. Um, and man, it's up for a debate, man. It's up for a debate. Obviously, we've seen last 2 or 3 years. Um, we've kind of seen WWE lessen their grip on the industry. As we know, WWE throughout the majority of the last decade has had a stranglehold over professional wrestling. Nobody was able to really break in. There was no. I mean, yeah, they had Impact. Yeah, they had New Japan, but they really never were getting much notoriety or anybody really talking about them. I wouldn't say until about 2 or 3 years, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, actually. The first time that we really started talking about New Japan and Impact, I mean, we started talking about Impact and TNA when AJ came over, AJ Styles, that is, and we started talking about New Japan when Shinsuke Nakamura came over. With AJ, I knew of AJ. My dad used to be huge into Impact. I always would come home after school. We'd sit down, we'd watch it. Because he would only have me for 3 days of the week. My parents are divorced, so I would come home and we'd watch Impact together. We'd watch Raw, we'd watch SmackDown all in one sitting, probably from about like 4 o'clock to like 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then go on our week. But that's always been a staple. Impact is something I grew up on. New Japan, however, was not something I grew up on. New Japan was something that I didn't really know much about. Shinsuke, when he came over, I started looking over. I was like, oh, they have these guys. They have Cody Rhodes, who he was over there at one point, and I knew who he was. They had Kenny Omega. They had the Young Bucks. They had Hangman Page. They had all these great wrestlers. They had Michael, or they had all these great wrestlers that they had over there at one point or another. They had Archer. They had Lance Archer. They had a lot of those guys that are currently in AEW at one point or another. Um, and when you see all those guys over there, you're starting to think, well, there is more to wrestling than just the WWE. And that's something that I didn't really ever anticipate, especially growing up with at least wrestling the way in the world of wrestling the way that I did. Yes, I knew of Impact, but to me, really, there was only two wrestling shows that were on TV. I did there when there was county fairs. They did have wrestling shows, and I would go to them, and there'd just be random people. But every time I saw them, I'm like, oh, their end goal is definitely to be in the WWE. There's really no higher ceiling. There's not much else you can do with becoming a professional wrestler outside of eventually becoming into the WWE, and you couldn't make a living if you're not. A lot of the guys um, that you see now, they ended up making their living on the independent scene. They ended up making their living in a way that at the time was considered not necessarily possible. That's a lot to do with pro wrestling tees. Pro wrestling tees did a brilliant job at allowing superstars to market themselves. Did a brilliant job at allowing them to come on there, sell T-shirts, sell merchandise. Um, The Young Bucks being one of the biggest. They were huge on professional wrestling tees. They were huge. And everybody loved them because they had these beautiful colors. They had a great gimmick. They were an entertaining team to watch. Something that necessarily you don't get all the time in the WWE. They knew how to market themselves. And then they made AEW. They made it with Kenny Omega. They made it with Cody. They made it with all the people that fell in line. And of course Tony Khan as well. They made AEW. And AEW has taken the world by storm. That is not a debate. It has taken the world by storm. But that leads us to the question as of who owns professional wrestling. Um, that is something that, whether or not you want to agree with the question, sorry if you can hear that, but whether or not you want to agree with it or not, there is a lot of brands that you can look at on who owns professional wrestling. Right now, the WWE to me is not professional wrestling. They have been terrible, hideous, terrible, awful, miserable. And there's much of different ways you can break down pro wrestling. Who has the best women's wrestling? Who has the best wrestling in general? Best in-ring style? Who has the best tag team wrestling? Who has the best overall show? And I think that's something you got to really talk about when you're talking about who has the best. Because, for example, for me, best women's wrestling is in Stardom. They got women like Siri. They got women like Utami. They got women like Mina. They got women like Watanabe. And when you see them doing what they're doing in the style that they're doing it, and that's the same style that Toni Storm came from, Asuka, Kyrie. There's a lot of women that came from that style of wrestling, the Joshi style wrestling. Jamie Hayter was over there. There's a lot of women over that have came from there, and they've been solid in the States. They've been great in the States. And to me, that is right now the best women's division, or best women's wrestling that is going on. And you look at tag team. Tag team, they've really fallen off. At one point, tag teams were awesome. They were awesome when the WWE had teams like DX, the Brothers of Destruction, Edge and Christian. At one point, tag team wrestling was a staple in WWE and something that people actually focused on. The Motor City Machine Guns. I mean, there was a lot of tag teams back in the day that were fun to watch. And we aren't necessarily in the era of tag team wrestling all around. However, AEW has done a phenomenal job with tag team wrestling. They have some of the best tag teams in the world. They have the Lucha Brothers. They have the Young Bucks. They have FTR. They have Jurassic Express, who I think is a phenomenal tag team. Obviously, they got some of the lower card guys that I still think are great, like Private Party. They still have guys out there like the Best Friends. Maybe they're not necessarily household names to everybody, but they are damn good wrestlers, and they put on great matches. And that is why I believe AEW has the top tag team division. And then you look over overall show quality. Show quality, I mean, when you're looking at a professional wrestling show, you're looking for storylines. You're looking for in-ring content. You're looking for what commentary comes off the best. And that, once again, to me, is AEW. That, to me, is AEW. Through and through, it is AEW. And the more I start to dive deeper into wrestling, the less of a love I have for the WWE. I'll always have a special place in my heart for the WWE. I always will. But as you've noticed, I didn't even watch Survivor Series. I didn't even watch Survivor Series. That is the first pay-per-view I have missed in I don't know how many years. I fucking watched the Saudi Arabia shows. I watched the Australian show that was a Super Showdown Down Under, whatever the fuck it was. I watched the network special when Dean Ambrose, which is now Jon Moxley, when he was on his way out. I've watched the MSG special. I've been in tune with WWE for many years now. But the more you are exposed to what good wrestling is supposed to look like, the more you are aware of other companies such as Impact, such as Stardom, such as New Japan with the Will Ospreays and the Jay Whites, such as AEW with the Kenny Omegas, the Moxleys, the Punks, the Bryan Danielsons. Once you're exposed to that, you start thinking and start really comprehending that WWE doesn't give a shit. They don't give a shit. I'm supposed to sit here and be excited about dumb shit. I didn't watch Survivor Series, but I know about this fucking egg. This egg. What the fuck does the egg got to do with wrestling? Nothing. Nothing at all. Toni Storm. She got a pie thrown in her face. What does that have to do with what her job is? Her job is to be a wrestler. WWE wants you to be a sports entertainer, not a wrestler. That's what you're seeing in NXT. That's why you're seeing guys like Gargano. Gargano, more than likely, will not be there very much longer. He did extend his contract. His last day is, I believe, this Sunday, which is coming up, NXT War Games. I will be covering it. But he did sign an extension for 1 week. And that gets him through War Games to put over the guys they want him to put over. I don't think Johnny Gargano's returning. And what happens when Johnny Gargano finds his way over into AEW? It's a bad situation to be in if you're WWE. I mean, obviously, you have the marks on Twitter. Oh, they're just signing up WWE rejects. I mean, if you're tossing Ember Moon out to dust, I'll gladly pick her up. I was telling Kevin, if you don't know him, Kevin Cabezzo on Twitter, one of my good friends, I was telling him, at one point, in like 2016, 2017, Ember Moon, to me, was the best women's wrestler in the world. When she was in that NXT run, when she was in that NXT Fatal 4-Way in Chicago, when she was up against Asuka, when she was doing all this great shit in NXT, and she was chasing the Women's Championship in NXT. She was, in my opinion, the best at that time. Ember Moon doesn't even get the time of day. She didn't even get the time of the day on the main roster. She didn't get the time of day at all. The only time of day she got is that she was in catering and she asked Titus, "Hey, buddy, the show almost over? Oh, hold on, Ember. You got about another 35 minutes before the show's over." That's the only time of day she got. Otherwise, Ember Moon, they did not give a shit about her. And it's pathetic. It's sad. Because Ember Moon was that damn good. She was that damn good. And I 100% hope she goes and does exactly what Deonna Purrazzo did to the WWE and become one of, if not the best women's wrestlers in the entire world. Because in my opinion, Deonna Purrazzo has been number one over the past year. Her and Britt Baker. Her and Britt Baker have been 1 and 2 for me. I hope Ember Moon can go do the same thing elsewhere. But for me, when we're talking about who owns pro wrestling right now, the tides have shifted. It isn't WWE. Yes, the ratings might suggest, oh, they're still getting 1.5 or whatever. They're getting 1.2. They're getting this. They're getting that. I don't give a fuck what they're getting. I don't care what they're getting. Is it showing up? Are they selling out arenas? I don't think they're selling out arenas. Are they really investing people into their product? Was one of their biggest pay-per-views of the year sold out? No. Survivor Series wasn't sold out. Do you think AEW has a problem selling out and All Out? Do you think AEW has a problem selling out Double or Nothing? Do you think AEW has a problem selling out Full Gear? It's a bad look, man. It is a bad look to be in the WWE right now. They don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about you. I've been saying it the last few months. They don't give a shit about you. Look at Isaiah Swerve Scott. One of the best guys to come out of NXT. Obviously, he was paired with a bunch of groups of hooligans that I don't even think he should have been paired with to begin with, especially on the main roster, because he was leagues better than them, and if they were going to keep him with him, he should have left him in NXT where he belonged. They were not ready. They got Swerve fired. Did you think they gave a shit about Swerve? You think they gave a shit letting Ember go? You think they gave a shit about any of these people? Sami Zayn's contract's coming up. Owens' contract's coming up. You think they give a shit? They don't care. They don't care unless your name's Roman Reigns, John Cena, Dwayne Johnson, or one of these pet projects of Vince McMahon, a Drew McIntyre, or a Seth Rollins, if you're not in the top 10 of Vince McMahon's favorites, they don't give a shit about you. I hate to break it. Charlotte Flair right now is seemingly falling out of favor. She is a selfish bitch. I will say it again. She is a selfish bitch. But somehow, someway, she is falling out of favor with Vince McMahon. I'm hearing reports that she might leave. She might leave. Charlotte fucking Flair, out of all people, might leave. Vince does not have a good locker room behind him. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be there. If they wanted to be there, you wouldn't have guys like Gargano leaving. You wouldn't have Bryan Danielson leaving. You wouldn't have Miro leaving or asking for their release. You wouldn't have that. What you would have is a locker room that's happy with what they're doing. And that's not the case. So when you ask me who owns professional wrestling 10 times out of 10 in 2021, I'm saying AEW.